Geoff Mosher is here. Let's get his thoughts on that real quick, because when I saw that this weekend, Julio Jones retired, and, he played for the Eagles for a cup of coffee. His last touchdown catch will go down as a member of the Philadelphia Eagles. But do you agree that the wide receiver, the drop-off from wide receiver from star player to what you are at the end of your career at not an advanced age is maybe the biggest disparity in production?
You mean to tell me that the Seahawks version of Jerry Rice wasn't as good as the 49ers version?
Isn't it crazy, though? Like how...
I think running back is somewhat similar to that, too, although you could still see guys old enough to be able to give you like a 70 or an 80-yard game, whereas, yeah, sometimes for receivers, it's a real struggle to separate.
Yeah, like the receivers, like they go from the best player in the league, like the most dominant performer in football one year, to like you are non-significant and unplayable the next year. It is crazy. Like Julio Jones had like a 3-year run where he was completely irrelevant. Right before he got to the Eagles, he had a cup of coffee around the league, a couple different places, and he just did. But a lot of receivers, I feel like a lot of these receivers, we're seeing it like right now. The guy that was with like Hopkins.
Like Cooper Kupp, the way he is. And it's usually injury related, right? Cooper Kupp we're just only 3 years removed from Cooper Kupp, I think, being the Triple Crown winner at wide receiver. And this year, he was barely a factor in the Rams offense.
Yeah,
and,
well,
again, the injuries caught up to him.
Yeah, but like DeAndre Hopkins, like this is a guy that, like, if you're a fantasy football guy, DeAndre Hopkins, Julio Jones, somebody just texted in Dez Bryant, like these guys for years are the best of the best, and then they're just not anymore, and they're just like not even significant. I saw Julio Jones, and I'm like, man, was he good? Man, he was unbelievable. And then here you get him, and you're like, how do you go from being that good and he's like 34 years old. You're not an old man, and you just can't play anymore.
Yeah, it's really interesting that you bring that up because the Bills, they really went with a roll of the dice. Right after the Von Miller thing didn't work out for them, not the Bills, I'm sorry, the Patriots. Roll of the dice there. They gave Stephon Diggs a really big contract for a guy who I would question, like, how many other teams were really trying to sign that guy to that 4-year deal that the Patriots signed him to. So that'll be a really good litmus test to your point, Mike, where is he still going to be a viable enough player to be worth that money at this stage of his career when he's already dealt with injuries and is already kind of on the downturn of his career?
So at what age, at what time do you start to look at AJBrown and think about that?
Well, like I said, a lot of these receivers, their downturns are correlated with injuries. I think AJ Green is another guy, right? And for the Bengals,
it's a good name.
Yeah. Where if he's healthy, and we know AJBrown came here with some knee issues. One of the reasons the Titans were sheepish about extending him. Now the Eagles have managed him really well. He's had 3 great years. He did miss a couple of games this past year, though. That was hamstring related, but he still put up great numbers. But I would say around 30, right? I would still think that AJBrown's on track to have at least 3 upper echelon years as long as they continue to manage the knees well. But if that doesn't happen, if the knees get bad and it goes south really quickly, then I think you might not get that kind of player, and then you'd worry about how far down he's going to slide if that were to be the case.
Yeah, it's like at what time when you're Howie Roseman, because I think, as we're talking about the draft, you're not really thinking about wide receiver because you have Brown and Smith, and you're like, at what point do you have to get ready for that sharp drop-off that we see? I mean, people are texting in some names. Odell Beckham, for 3 years, he's great, and then, boom, you're just like, what happened to this guy? And then, what ends up happening? Those guys, they just keep latching on for, 1-year deals, and you're like, oh, the guy's in Tennessee now. He's got to – and then nothing. Like, they just fade away. The only guy that I can think of that was still productive but not as productive was, Larry Fitzgerald, reinvented himself as a completely, tremendous possession receiver late in his career. Later on, he got kind of morphed into this possession receiver, where before he was a possession guy, but still a big play threat. He at the end just became a guy who was a chain mover.
Yeah, Yeah, he was, and it goes to show you how talented and how physically dominant he was that he could do that. Not everybody can just morph themselves into a slot receiver at the later stages of their career and still be as productive as he was. So, there was a name that came into my mind, and now I can't think about it, but yeah, I mean, it's a position that you fall off the cliff pretty quickly there.
Very quickly. And, when I saw Julio Jones, it made me think of Brown. And when is that drop for him? When's the year where he goes from, big play, unguardable to, he lost a step, and it's noticeable.
And there's no doubt that the reason why Julio Jones really fell quickly was because of the constant foot injuries that he's had. I mean, there was a lot of maintenance on that foot. And you can understand why he had that also, because he's a freak of nature. I mean, he was 6'3", 220 pounds. Now think about that, running the kind of routes that he did, the crispness, the cuts that he was able to do. I mean, you don't see a whole lot of 6'3", 220 guys being able to run and cut and break and contested catch like he could. But obviously the price tag from that was that he constantly had lower leg and foot injuries.
So I want to throw a couple of receivers that changed teams this offseason. Are they in the category of you think they're done, like the arrow's down on them, all right? Mm-hmm. DK Metcalf.
No, I don't think the arrow is down on it. Well, I mean, listen, the Steelers don't have a quarterback right now, right? So I mean, if you're telling me that Mason Rudolph is starting off as the Steelers quarterback, then I'm probably going to tell you that, Metcalf may not have their greatest numbers in 2025. I mean, he's coming off a year where he had only 992 yards, and that's with playing with Geno Smith, who's not bad. I think what more is limiting for him is that he sort of runs a limited route tree, and it kind of caught up to him after that first big season in 2020. But physically, he's in pretty good shape. So I would think if they were able to get themselves a quarterback who can get him the ball, that they would get a couple of pretty good years out of him.
All right, Deebo Samuel.
Boy, that's a long pause for me because he's not your typical wide receiver. And he's never been a guy that you're going to target down the field 6, 7, 8 times. So with him, it's not like separation is the biggest thing. It's can you get him in space where he can use that big body and those smooth moves that he has after the catch to continue to create yards. He's been used like a running back in San Francisco a couple of years ago, right? They had injuries to McCaffrey, and they basically turned Deebo into a part-time running back, part-time receiver, and it really worked out well for him. But that also has led to him being injured. So that's where the injuries come into play. If he can't stay healthy, I could see him being a real issue there in Washington. If he is healthy, I'm not worried about separation with him. I feel like Cliff Kingsbury will get him in open space, and they will be able to maximize his abilities. McLaurin will still be the field stretcher.
Yeah. Talking with Geoff Mosher, football forward, looking at receivers. Julio Jones, former Eagle, by the way, he retired over the weekend, which made me think about the receiver position. The Eagles, AJBrown, when is his drop-off? The next guy on my list for you is Davante Adams, Green Bay. Then he went to Vegas. Now he's with the Jets. Then he goes to the Jets. Now he's with the Rams. Are the Rams getting a stud, or are they getting the guy that just keeps bouncing around and you're like, is he got a – it's not that he doesn't have anything left maybe. I don't know. He's an interesting one.
Sometimes I think Davante Adams is older than he is in that he's 32, which is older for a wide receiver.
That's the age, man.
That is the age, but he is an elite, and he keeps himself in great condition. And if you go look at his year last year, Mike, playing on a bad team but with a good enough quarterback to get him the ball – he had some really impressive games last year. So I am of the belief that putting him alongside Puka Nacua and with Matthew Stafford and in that environment with that offensive coaching staff especially, that you're going to get a guy who can give you 1,000 yards in that offense. I mean, the guy had a 9-catch, 198-yard game against the Jaguars in Week 11. That's late in the season. I mean, he had a 7 for 68. He had a 9 for 109. He had a 2-touchdown game, and this is all in the second half of last year. His last game was 688 and a touchdown against Miami, Mike. So I don't think the father time has come for him just yet. And I think because he's playing with Puka Nacua, he doesn't have to be the guy catching 150 balls. I think it was a good fit.
Well, Puka Nakua's new teammate is Devontae Adams. His old teammate is Cooper Kupp, and he is in Seattle now. Will the Seahawks benefit from this?
I got to squint to see it, Mike. He was with the Rams for a team that was about 14 yards away from knocking the Eagles off in the playoffs. He did make a couple nice catches in that game, but all year he just looked like someone who just lost the ability to really separate. And even in a great offense where you can get open in space, he just was not nearly as much of a factor as I think a lot of people thought he would be, if healthy, which he was. So I think I can't sit here and put him in this new Clint Kubiak offense in Seattle with Sam Darnold. And can he be a nice complementary part to what they've got with Jackson, Smith, and Jigba? Yeah, but I think his days, certainly his days of winning the Triple Crown are way behind now, and I'm just not sure he's anything more than a 2 or a 3. By the way, the name I was thinking of, a guy who I've gained a lot of appreciation for because of this conversation is Mike Evans. Because I was listening to some pod recently, and somebody was trying to basically say Mike Evans is going to be in the Hall of Fame, but he shouldn't because he's never actually been a top 3 or 4 receiver in any year. He's just consistently been 1,000, 1,100 yards. And I'm like, yeah, but that's every single – who has ever done that for 11 straight years? He is an absolute Hall of Famer in my book.
Yeah. Oh, he's what he's doing is pretty unbelievable. The consistency. Stephon Diggs, you mentioned him. It sounds like you think that he may not have anything left.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think that it's not a bad signing for a team when you have a young quarterback like Drake May and you're trying to give him a reliable target. I just question the years and the money that they gave him. I mean, they paid him like they expect him to be a 1 or a 1A. And, you kind of think if he was that good and if the Texans felt he was that good, then they would have figured out a way to hold on to him. I mean, they traded to get him. He's going to be, he's 31, so he'll wind up turning 32, that magic number. Only played 8 games last year because he was coming back from the injury. I don't know, Mike. I think he can still be good, but I don't know if he's great.
All right, good stuff on the wide receivers. Julio Jones, his last catch for touchdowns with the Eagles, but his biggest miss was missing a touchdown catch against the Eagles in 2018 in the playoffs. That one went right through his fingertips, and the Eagles benefit from that, winning a Super Bowl. I want to get a couple quick thoughts on you. We didn't talk to you last week. Vic Fangio says he wants Cooper DeJean at nickel, it looks like, again. So it looks like we have our answer on where Cooper DeJean will be on defense next year, which kind of opens up that outside corner spot now.
Yeah, I believe when I was on with you last week, we talked about, this is before Vic came out and talked to John Clark. I had told you that, what Adam and I were hearing was that they wanted to keep him at the nickel spot. And certainly if you can understand why Vic would want that, Vic's not a huge blitzer, but he likes the sim pressures, we call them, where you blitz someone from the second level like Cooper DeJean, and then you drop an edge defender. And that's a lot harder to do with Cooper DeJean if he's from the outside. You don't really blitz your outside corner a whole lot, and certainly not if you're Vic Fangio. So it's a bit – plus he plays physical. He plays the run well. He really is the ideal nickel corner. So if you can get him to stay there, as long as you're happy with what you've got on the outside, and right now they're looking to – that's why they signed Adoree Jackson, and they've got Kelee Ringo entering year 3, then it makes sense. Now, if the competition on the outside leaves a lot to be desired and they're not happy, they can always move Cooper outside and then try to figure out the nickel situation after that.
Do you put now corner on the list of things that could be a high priority in this draft?
No, I mean, it was always on my list, certainly. I absolutely was on my list because, like I said, you've got Adoree Jackson who's going to be 30. And, he's been kind of around the middle last year. He just signed a 1-year deal with the Giants, going into the season last year. He's not a sought-after commodity. And you got Kelee Ringo, who is a good athlete, a little stiff-hipped, as 6'1" corners tend to be, 200-pound corners. Not the most fluid guy. People would probably tell you the same about Cooper DeJean. But that doesn't mean he can't play the spot. It's just, just one desirable trait that he may not have, but he's certainly not proven anything, but he'll be given the chance. But yeah, if there's a corner sitting there either in the first or second round who the Eagles have a really high grade on and think can come in and compete, why wouldn't they pull the trigger on
Yeah,
that?
well, because I only ask that question is, at 32, do we think that's a spot where you want to take a corner? Do you think that guy can play right away and challenge Kaylee Ringo? Or do you want to say, hey, we really want Ringo to win the job and we have Adoree Jackson if not, as opposed to bringing in another guy that you probably want to see get on the field and play if you're drafting a guy at 32?
I think one of the things the Eagles have done well is not playing that game of, we kind of want to see this guy win the job, so we're not going to draft anyone at that position. They had some pretty good edge defenders at the time that they drafted Nolan Smith, but they drafted Nolan Smith, and look how important he wound up being. I think the whole point of their approach of let's sign as many veterans to one-year deals as possible to compete with guys we already have on the roster is to draft-proof themselves so they can just go ahead and take the best player. So you're not passing on a player that you have a really high grade on because you're sitting there trying to hope another guy wins a job at that spot. You just want to take guys that you have graded really high.
Yeah, I know. You look at Ringo and Adoree Jackson, and you just wonder, is that going to be the battle, or are they going to add another guy into that mix over there? That one, I think, is something. By the way, Eagles get outside on the practice field March 21st. You'll see the Eagles doing some, I guess, organized OTA stuff like that. It'll be the first time they're out there. And then, of course, we'll have more storylines for draft week, which is, of course, April 24th. And you can listen to the draft right here on 97.3 ESPN. We'll get you ready for it with the Football at 4 guys. And I know you guys are getting ready for the draft. You got a lot of content for all the Inside the Birds fans and listeners over there.
Say that again. I'm sorry, you froze up on me a little bit.
I said you guys getting ready for the draft with a lot of Inside the Birds content over there.
Oh, yeah. We're really doubling up this year. We have our annual series with Greg Cosell, the Intel of Greg Cosell, where he breaks down the prospects at every position from tape standpoint. But now we've added an analytical look at these guys. Sam Finkel, our analytics expert's been doing a great job of looking at each position, all the prospects, and how they test versus their actual production in college and how that compares to past first-round picks, top 100 picks, all players drafted at those positions. And it's just been wonderful to kind of juxtapose both series against each other. And really, you get the full, everything about all of basically the top 150 players in the draft after you're done listening to all the Inside the Birds content.
All right. Well, we'll have plenty more on the draft leading up to it with the guys. And, of course, Geoff's back on Wednesday after beating the Dodgers. Are you in? Are you now more optimistic?
Yeah, let me just say this too. I really think we got to give Jordan Romano some time. He clearly the injury last year impacted him. He had great. I heard you reading his stats, and I watched him. He was a terrific reliever for 3 straight years. We do know sometimes relievers fall off the face of the earth like wide receivers, but those are normally like the 1 year like a Jean-Marc Gomez who gets 37 saves, and then the next year he's got a 6-something ERA. This guy's too good, Mike, to just fall off the face of the earth. I just think he needs to get his fastball back and then work the slider off that. So he needs time.
I'll tell you what, that's a pretty big drop-off. He's 97, 98. Now he's 91, 92. I'm a little concerned because I agree with you. I liked him in Toronto. I thought it was a smart little, sneaky little signing. We'll see what ends up happening with Jordan Romano. All right, Moshe, we'll talk to you later this week.
See you, my man.